Hey everybody, this is Johnny Bean, and this is Johnny Bean TV. It is June 5th, 2020, 8:08 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're here today. There we are. David Nesdahl.
And Ted Templeman.
There we go. Nice.
It's stuck to my cheek.
Oh. Jay Haddon.
Oh, I don't have anything to show.
I'm glad we didn't see that.
Don't worry. I got you covered.
And Greg Renoff. Hey, man.
I'm Michael McDonald.
And Michael McDonald.
And Michael McDonald.
Dude, thank you so much for being here, man. I know.
You're welcome.
It's been a long time. I think the last time you were here was like, what, 3 years ago? 4 years ago?
It's been a while.
I think it's 4 years ago. It was 4 years ago, and I remember we had a storm here, and I couldn't get on the show because I had no internet.
Yeah, you weren't here. It was me and Rob Johnson.
Yep.
Johnson.
And that's when we were talking about Van Halen Rising.
Well, now we're back for round two.
Nice. So, what am I doing? It's my first show ever.
I think the flu.
So far, so good.
The flu from last night is catching tonight.
Oh man. Here we go, you guys. Thank you very much to our executive producers here on YouTube.
God.
Thank you so much. Charles Green, Robbie Johnston, Music Therapy Laz, David Annis, Thomas Santiago, Mike Neese, Connor Johnson, 5150, Michael Smith, Some Dave Dude, and Steve Carmichael. Thank you so much. Channel members on YouTube. We're currently live on YouTube and Facebook. So leave a thumbs up, subscribe, click the join button, click the bell, everything.
Click it all.
Click it all, yes. So man, who's watching us?
Well, we only have an hour, so
I know. Quickly.
Where's the Micro Machines guy? Can read super fast the roll call.
Oh man, we need him. Yeah. Hugh Caldwell's watching us. John BL 5150. Michael Smith. Cobra Kai Platoon. Mickey
Amanda.
Amanda. Janny Ty. Thank you guys.
And everybody else. Fruitcake Tony. Can't forget fruitcake.
Hey,
yes,
fruitcake.
Tony.
I love fresh strawberries with my fruitcake.
Nice. So Greg.
Yes, sir.
So you have a new book?
I do. I
think Dave has it there somewhere.
Dave
I have it when I'm not dropping it.
with me because Dave had one. As soon as I sat down, I saw Dave had it. So what do I need it for? Thank you, Dave, for providing the visual.
Anytime I can show my face.
Let's see it. Let's get a close up on that. Sort of closer.
There it is. Ted and Sunset Sound.
There it is.
Beautiful.
Recording Women and Children First, actually.
Here's the back of it.
Man. Well, we don't want to give it away.
No.
Yeah, if you read the back cover, why read the book?
Yeah.
And
don't tell anybody. If you read the back cover of the bookstore, you don't have to buy the book.
And right here is where the autograph is going to go.
There you go. I'll put it right there.
No, I mean Ted's. No, I'm just kidding.
Wait, we get Ted out of his bunker. Yeah, we'll get him to sign.
Oh man,
he's in his Corona bunker like everybody else.
So Jay, you want to start off with the first question?
Well, I'm just curious. I mean, what goes in when you're starting a book, especially like an autobiography? Like, how do you get into that, and what's like the first kind of steps you take doing all that? I mean, it's, to me, that seems super tricky, and like the questions that you have to ask, and then to remind this person.
Right. Yeah, it was a super tricky process from beginning to end. I mean, honestly, the first thing I did was just first convince Ted, because he was sort of like, why would anyone want to do a book on me? Like, why would you want to do a book on me? And had to kind of talk him into it and really lay out my vision for what I thought the book would be, which would be a musical biography, really, more than like a personal, like, obviously in a book like this, you're going to talk about, what you're experiencing as an individual, but it's much more about his relationship with his artists and the making of records than it was about any sort of like private life of Ted. And then I really thought that he had a diverse and kind of unusual career. There are other producers who were artists first and then became producers, but I thought he had a really interesting life trajectory where he went from being this kid who was a trumpet phenom and was a jazz buff and took up all these different instruments, and then got hooked on the Beatles and ended up in a pop group in the 60s, and then went on to be a senior vice president at Warner Brothers and one of the most successful producers of his era. So I thought that made for a really unique life story that wasn't just about like, oh, I grew up and then I became a record producer. There was all this other musical stuff that went on before that. So that I thought would make for a compelling biography. And then beyond that, obviously, he recorded so many hits with so many different people. I mean, Van Halen, Doobies, Little Feat, Carly Simon. We could go on and on and on. So all of those relationships that he had with those artists, and then his successes and failures as a producer, I thought all that would really made for compelling reading as well, I thought. And so that was the starting point, was to sort of like make the case to him that it was worthy of a biography, and then just talk to him and then do my own research, which was to go through, back issues of Billboard, old Warner Brothers promotions, and just sort of try to present things to him, be like, hey, do you remember this? And he would go, oh, I forgot all about that. And we talk about that thing or whatever, because he obviously was telling me stories and talking about different things that had happened in his career, but there were things that, like anyone else, unless you show them something and it kind of triggers a memory. So that was my due diligence to go back and dig through all that stuff and put together a timeline as well, kind of to like line things up, because I dare say, like, if someone said, when did that happen in high school, some event that was kind of memorable, you might be like, I think that was junior year, might be senior year, you're not sure. And, to kind of get all that stuff kind of nailed down for people when they read the books, to just, make sure everything kind of lined up the way things actually happened. So, yeah, that was the process.
So,
Yeah.
how go ahead.
So something that I didn't know about him, which is actually it's very cool. I forgot to mention, I'm live from Santa Cruz right now.
Yes, you are in the right exact place.
Ted Templeman was born here in Santa Cruz.
Yep.
In that room.
Yeah.
Here. Probably
Maybe so.
in the house.
Maybe so. His parents' music store was on Walnut Street.
Oh, no kidding.
Yep. His grandfather's, and then his parents' music store on Walnut Street. Yep. So yeah, big long roots going back to the 1920s. His family was there in Santa Cruz. So he grew up surfing, like everybody else from Santa Cruz. You got to get on a surfboard at some point in time, right?
Oh, everybody,
including you, Johnny?
No, no, I stay away from it.
Yeah. So, Greg, how was the process of putting this book together different from the process of Van Halen Rising?
Well, I mean, the thing that was on its face seemed easier was you're really only, in theory, dealing with one person. But it was, in some ways, more complicated, because there were whole areas of Ted's career and whole things that were important to Ted's life. For example, like his love for big band music and jazz, that I knew basically nothing about, that I had to get up to speed on, because I really wanted to try to do justice to that stuff, because it was super important to his musical ethos and how he worked on producing records and the type of stuff he did, particularly with, for example, percussion. And that was one thing that kind of was really, I thought people could hear right away in the records that Ted was a real, because he called himself a percussion freak. And that came from a lot of the Latin jazz he liked in the 50s. And so, in writing the Van Halen Rising book, there was obviously a lot of stuff about Van Halen I didn't know, but you're still just talking about like basically 4 or 5 guys, like we're in Van Halen, the Van Halen guys. And then everything was sort of along the way, different twists and turns. This was, I had to familiarize myself with the entire Doobies catalog, like everybody else. I knew the hits, and, I had heard greatest hits, and I may have heard minute by minute, front to back a few times growing up, but I didn't know like the second side of Stampede really well. And that stuff was important to Ted. And sometimes he'd say this song, he'd listen to a song, go, oh, this song was really important for the Doobies because it was a transitional moment or something. And I had to go and listen to that stuff and really try to unpack it. And then listening and trying to decipher what he had told me, which he'd be like, I put, with some percussion instrument on it. And I'd be like listening and trying to hear it. It's like, so for me, that was stuff I really wanted to do right by the book, which was to really be serious about the stuff he was telling me. And so it took a lot more time than I expected to do that stuff. Again, when I started the project to basically write his biography, I thought it would take me less time than it took to write Van Halen Rising, and probably took me a little bit less time, but really was not that much less time actually, because it was just, there were just a lot of things I had to really educate myself about, for lack of a better term, like get to where I could write convincingly about it and understand. I talk about at the end of the book and the afterword for the book when people get to it. He introduced me to dozens of bands and acts and singers and performers that, as you might imagine, I was born in 1969. He was born during World War II. There's going to be a whole generation of music, 2 generations of music that I had no exposure to that he had growing up, but that were really important to him. And he was, telling me about these different artists, R&B liked, record labels that he liked. OK Records is one that was a label that specialized in Black artists that were super important to Ted's founding of his musical sensibility. And, I'd never even heard of this label. And so he was telling me about these different songs, go on YouTube and you listen, and you sort of have to try to get yourself, get your head wrapped around that to be able to explain on paper what he was going through. So that stuff, along with, again, like, did I know the Honeymoon Suite album really, really well? I didn't. That's just that type of stuff. So that ended up,
that record.
Right. So again, a lot of cul-de-sacs along the way, for lack of a better term, where I had to sort of stop and go, okay, I got to get into this stuff and really understand it before I can write about it.
Mm-hmm.
So any of the bands that you had to like kind of, do some research on and listen to, any of that stuff, you're like, how have I never heard this before? And like, are you still listening to some of the stuff?
Sure. I mean, like Little Feat, I'd heard Willin and some of the other stuff, but Fat Man in the Bathtub and that stuff, which Ted didn't even spoke. Really, like, to listen to Sailing Shoes front to back was pretty mind blowing. The Captain Beefheart stuff I had not heard at all, like Clear Spot. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, this is incredible. I listened to that stuff all the time. And then having Ted tell the stories about making the records made it all kind of come to life, talking about, for example, with Cold, Cold, Cold from Little Feat. Take a listen to that. He has this huge drum sound that he and Don Landy got for that record, for that song particularly, did in Sunset Sound Studio 1, is the same basic thing that they did for Rock Candy, that same type of thing. And so to sort of, go through those different records and listen to that stuff and go, wow, this is really incredible. And then to have my guide, for lack of a better term, kind of explaining what he was trying to do and think about, and how in times he was so surprised that certain songs became hits and then disappointed that ones he thought weren't going to be hits. That was really interesting too, to kind of have that that kind of backstory, to be like, that I didn't expect this was going to take off like it did, or whatever.
Yeah. But that happens from time to time. And I know, Dave, you're ready to ask another one, but I just got to stay on this.
No, it's all right. That's all right.
I mean, how many times have you either, just listened to the radio or had an album on, and the hit from that album comes on, and you heard a band say, we needed one more song. We already thought we had the single or the hit, and we just wrote this by the seat of our pants. And next thing you know, it's their biggest song ever. Definitely. I mean, it's crazy sometimes. Like, how did they not know that this would have been a hit? Maybe the right analogy is, maybe it's the wrong analogy, but it's sort of like picking stocks. It's the same thing. It's like the people who pick stocks well are wrong, not infrequently, but they're right more than they're wrong. And that's sort of what it's like with look at Ted's career. He was wrong less than he was right. He was right a lot more times than he was wrong. But there were times where he thought this song's going to be a hit, and it didn't connect at all. And he just was like, it's just interesting to think of, because you sort of imagine like someone with ears like that and talent like that as a producer, and someone who's so tuned into songs is going to be like able to know. And it's not, it's not a science. It's an art, and you miss sometimes, and other times you're surprised by, you put together a good song and you think, it's just an album track, and next thing you know, it's a hit.
I think you hit the nail right on the head when you say it's not science, it's not math, it is an art, and art is to be interpreted differently by different people. But this book does a great job of really focusing on the music that Ted was involved with. In fact, there was a great story about the song "Jump" in the book. Mm-hmm. Can you share that story with us?
Sure. I want to talk about that too, because I think sometimes in the sort of people want to kind of boil down a part of a book to like a couple of sentences and be like, oh, it's this Ted didn't like this song and didn't like that song. And, that was a song that when Ted first heard what he would have called the musical idea for it, he wasn't crazy about it, because it didn't really fit with what way he was hearing the demo that was done by Ed, that he didn't really think it fit with what Van Halen was going to be able to present to the public successfully. Ted would tell you, look, Van Halen was doing keyboards in every single album they'd done keyboards. Women and Children First, Fair Warning, Diver Down. There's keyboards and secrets, as people, you guys all know, and people don't really know, but there's keyboards. There's like tons of keyboards. Tons, right? There's not tons, but there's like, Ted was like, I was never against keyboards for Van Halen. I was never like no keyboards. But he just thought this was going to be kind of a bridge too far. And then, but the thing is, as Ted will tell you, when he heard the finished track, or I shouldn't say finished track, the fairly finished track that Eddie and Alex and Don Landy put together one night, he talks about this in the book, he was like, damn, this is really good. But then he was like, oh shit, it's really good. It's going to wreck Van Halen. Like, he just thought it was like he just didn't think the public was going to accept it. And, he admits freely in the book that I was wrong about that. Ed was right. He convinced me, and I didn't say not to do the song. We went ahead with the song, and he created an anthem. And I didn't see that coming. He said, I thought it was, by the time it was finished, he said, this is a really cool song. People are going to be, Halen fans are going to be like, what the hell is this, basically? And some people were like that, but obviously the fan base grew exponentially from the song.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the first songs I probably ever heard of Van Halen.
Yep. Yeah, me too, for sure.
I remember exactly where I was when I first heard that.
Oh, really?
So I didn't know any difference. I'm like, this is good. And then I dug back and bought everything else.
Well, right. I mean, that's the thing, is that, Van Halen probably became twice as popular as they had before 1984, right? They just, or more, like 3 times as popular. So it's like, there was all these people who just sort of, that was their starting point.
Van Halen was always a musician's band.
Right.
But that record really brought them into the public. I mean, they blew up. Yeah.
What was the order of singles on that? Was it Hot for Teacher first?
No, Jump was first.
Jump was first? No shit.
Jump was first, and then I'll Wait.
I think Panama. I could be wrong. I think Panama.
Panama, but it didn't last very long.
Panama.
It wasn't on the charts very long.
I'll Wait, Hot for Teacher, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So Ted did a lot of work in the studio with Don Landy. They made some great records. And can you give us some thoughts as why you think this partnership was so good?
Ted talked about to me that he first met Don in 1968, and Don was working on a song that Harper's Bazaar did, and Don did phasing on it. And Don had kind of gotten a reputation around town as one of the guys who could really do phasing well around Hollywood. He had done it on a song called Sky Pilot that was a big hit in 67. Don had done this, and Don did it on Knock on Wood for Harper's Bazaar, and they started to become friends at that session. And then he said when he and Don hung out, they sort of hung out a few times. He went to his apartment, and Don played records for him. And he's like, oh, you have the same stereo I have, basically. You like, and they start talking the same stereo, like what they would have called hi-fi.
Oh, yeah.
Time. Mm-hmm. And then Don worked on a number of other sessions, and he said they just sort of clicked. I mean, they just sort of had those personalities that sort of synced together. And that Ted also could see that Don was a, what would I call, sort of a talent that hadn't been fully tapped yet. That he was basically, Don was at the very beginning of his career. I like to tell people that it's kind of interesting. Don had done sessions where he had done the first real big session he ever worked on as a second engineer was Waiting for the Sun by the Doors at TTG Studios in 1968. He'd worked on an Everly Brothers record. He had done a number of things, but then when he really started to partner up with Ted, Doobie Brothers, Little Feat, a number of other those early Captain Beefheart, that's when they really started to get into sync and the hits started to come. Ted would say that it was almost like, there never failed with an album that he talked about. He just talked about Don. He's like, oh, Don did this, Don did that. And of course, he's giving credit to the artist too, but I couldn't have done it without Don. He'd say I'd look at Don, and Don would just reach and adjust the EQ or something. Don just had this almost like this pilot-co-pilot thing going on where you didn't have to say anything. He would just look over, and Don would know exactly what he wanted done. He said it was almost uncanny how in sync they came with each other. And so the other thing Ted really tried to emphasize, which some people missed, was that one of the reasons why he gave so much credit to Don, he's like, look, there were different types of engineers. Some guys are better than others. Some guys didn't know when to shut up and talk too much, what could be disruptive. If you're working with an artist and all of a sudden the engineer just sort of yells some stuff out, like, well, why don't you guys try it this way? It's basically shut up. This guy is stressed.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get him to do this drum part right, and I got this guy behind the board, and he talked about how Don sort of intuitively understood how to sort of work in that environment, and that Ted could walk away with an artist, sit down with them and work on lyrics, and come back and sit down at the board, and everything perfectly ready to go. Like Don would just be like right there with everything, like perfect. And he said that was just he said you have no idea how important it is when you're X artist comes in the studio and they're high, right? And you're like, what the hell's wrong with you? You got to sing, like get it together, like, and you're like, I'm not, like you have to like basically pull someone out and talk to them. I mean, seriously, right? Talk to somebody and like get them in the right headspace. Or you didn't finish your lyrics. We got to do this right now. We're out of time. We have to be out of the studio in 3 days. We got to do the song right now. Sit down, 15 minutes, let's finish the lyrics. Like that stuff happened. And Ted said like Don was always like just able to handle anything and was able to do everything just so well. And of course, things sounded so good. I mean, that's the other obvious thing is that things sounded so amazing that Don did. So, Ted's like technical genius, and like this, he had just sort of this kind of the natural personality and approach and the mindset to be an engineer to do it right.
Well, I know we're not getting to everybody's questions, but one stuck out, and when we're talking about the two of them, Grant Fisher asks, was 1984 the last album Don and Ted worked on together? Yeah,
I mean, I think that is correct. I'm just thinking about myself. Yes, because Don then went on to work almost exclusively with Van Halen, other than with Private Life. And then Don departed the music industry after he did the first Private Life record, which came out in like 89. Is that right?
89 or 89. No, because I saw them on tour with Van Halen in 88.
So it came out like in 88, right? And then
88.
Right. And then Ted did the second Private Life record with Ed.
Yeah, that was
the
like,
last thing they did together as a
like
the
90.
last thing they did
89 or 90. Yeah.
But something else I thought was interesting that people may have overlooked in the book was that twice in the on the albums that followed, Don and Ed sat down with Ted in Ted's office when they were done with 5150. Despite all the craziness that went around with 1984 and the sort of the breakup stuff, and with OU 812, they sat down with Ted in Ted's office. Ted was still an executive with Warner Brothers, obviously, and Ted to help to get Ted's advice on sequencing the records. Now Ted didn't remember like, I told him to do this or that, but they like came in and sat down and was like, the songs, what do you think? Here's the sequences we have. Let's play the tapes or whatever, and listen. And what do you think? Which do you think should be the third song or the first song? And so, like Ted said, it was sort of, it was obviously it had gotten kind of messy up at 5150 and have any like, grievances against those guys. He was just like, okay, look, they're doing their thing and I'm gonna do my thing. And, and he was always happy to help them. And that's when Ed called to say, hey, can you do the second Private Life record? Ted said, yeah, I'll do it.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought Private Life, I thought they were a great band. I thought their stuff was great. And I think, I don't know. I think that's really cool. I didn't know that about Ted helping out.
Yeah, did I?
Behind the scenes on 0812. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 5150. And then again, he was up there for went back, I guess, partially up to 5150, but I think they finished most of the record at One on One, which was the Private Life record, and then they did the Fuck record.
Yeah.
One obviously as well. That was kind of the last thing with Van Halen.
Right.
Official Duty.
Yeah.
One on One, that's where the Black Album was recorded.
Yeah, One on One. Yeah, Bullet Boys was done there.
Dream Theater Awake, right? I think that was there. Yep.
Very cool. So Ted obviously produced for Warner Brothers, but he also had an executive role. How did that executive role begin for him?
Well, Ted started as a tape listener, which was like the bottom of the barrel job, which was like he went from, it's interesting because he went from being a pop star for Warner Brothers, not a huge one, but like, a guy who was like obviously known around the building and stuff because they had a top 10 hit or top 15 hit or whatever it was. Harper's was.
Oh no.
Greg.
He looks angry.
You didn't like that question, Dave.
Greg, if you can hear me, jump back in. There, I'll do that. Hey, Michael. Michael, that's very cool, man. We're from Michael Gutierrez. Says you got to meet Ted hanging with Eddie at a meeting with Coca-Cola.
Oh, cool.
That's cool, man. Yeah, it looks like Greg froze. So Now we can say hi to everybody. Oh, there you are.
I'm back.
Hey, there.
No,
you
I
are.
loved the question actually. Where was I?
He looks
Where was
mad.
I? I don't.
The face that you had on, it's like he looks pissed off.
So Ted went from being a tape listener. He ended up finding the Doobie Brothers demo. That was how he sort of got his foot in the door as a producer. And then after he had a couple of hits, including the second Doobie Brothers records, he got offered a job as an A&R staff A&R producer, which was basically like one of the guys who was on this team of 8 to 10 people, who was kind of a bullpen of people who would produce records. And eventually he got up the corporate. He became late 70s. He was a executive around the time that Van Halen hit, maybe a little before that. I think a little bit before that, he became an executive vice president, and eventually in the late 80s, early 90s, he got promoted to senior vice president. And then he was in the middle 80s, he was head of A&R too, which was, a big job. Like you're basically like the last person who gets to decide like what bands get signed or not. So that was the other thing he did. But he just produced. I shouldn't say produced. He basically, proved that he was a guy who could be involved with making hits. And so, once that starts to happen, people realize you have good ears. You get a seat at the table, so to speak. And he had that interesting dual role, which is you're a house producer, but you're also an executive.
That's great, man. I don't know how I would have answered that question if you would have asked that to me. I'm just trying to stump you with questions and then you're just answering them all. Great. Anyone else? I have more, but I don't want to give them all up right now.
Yeah, I'm ready to be stumped. I'll be like, I'll freeze. I'll be like,
no, I'm just kidding with you. I'm just having a little fun. Go ahead, Jay. You have anything else?
Well, no, I saw one in the chat too. Somebody, I apologize if I.
There's a lot of stuff in the chat.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Somebody said, "Is there any?" I apologize, I can't find it now, but here we go. Sylvesterado 1 asks, "Is there anything that you didn't put in the book because it didn't necessarily fit, but is an interesting story?"
There's a lot of stuff I didn't put.
I bet, yeah, I can imagine. But is there anything that you really wanted to put in that you're like, there's no place for it or something?
Yeah, I mean, this book could have been 1,000 pages, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, there was, for example, I do wish one of the things in trying to do a book like this, you're trying to keep the story going forward in terms of a readability issue. You have to think about, okay, I'm trying to build chapters around different parts of Ted's life that are going to be digestible for people. So there were things that, he did more stuff in the 90s that I ended up, like, for example, he did Cheap Trick. He did Joan Jett, which I probably could have put stuff in there about that, but I, in the end, was sort of like, well, it's just getting detoured away from the stuff I wanted to talk about, which was sort of how Warner Brothers as a company was kind of unraveling. There was a couple of things I talked about, Bette Midler, and a couple of other things that he did. But I thought it was more important to sort of keep driving that part of the story, because that was basically the conclusion of the book, was the end for Ted with Warner Brothers, and how he sort of had to kind of pull himself together after that all went down for him. But yeah, I mean, he did so many records. Some people that people have never heard of. Other ones that I did talk about in the book that probably no one had heard of before, but there were, if you look at his discography, it's huge. And so I regret like not spending time on certain things. And it just was a matter of like, it just ended up being like, kind of felt like shoehorned in. It didn't mean to be like, you should never be shoehorned in Cheap Trick or an incredible band. And I don't mean to sound like that at all. I just mean to sound like, in terms of trying to tell a story, it just didn't fit us in the way. I was just like, this is sort of like hanging here. And so you end up pulling that piece out,
Kind of like a movie where you see the deleted scenes and you're like, well, that scene was awesome, but you can understand
exactly. That's exactly right. Exactly right. You're like, it's a great scene, but you're like, yeah, it just was. You don't want people to, you're building towards something and you're trying to get that out. So, but that would probably be the main thing in terms of, he talked a lot about how much he loved working. He just did a couple of songs with her, but it was just a thing where they Warner Brothers had signed Joan Jett, and she worked with a bunch of different producers, and Ted spent a few days with her working on some songs. And he was like, she's just, just so great, and loved working with her so much. And so, he wanted to do, it was one of those things too, that he really wanted to try to do right by the artists that he worked with, to basically show his appreciation. I mean, even if he didn't always like get along with everybody, like he appreciated the fact that they made records with him and that they worked with him. And so he wanted to really, I think, pay tribute to those people. So sometimes you're like, yeah, I wish I could have done more with some of those other other people, but it was just not possible. Like you said, it's a 455 page, whatever, 50-page book. It's like, I don't think it, it's like longer than Grant's memoir after a while, It's
encyclopedia.
It's just like it defeats the purpose, right? I don't know.
I'll tell you what, it'd be a great addendum, like, exactly like a blooper reel. It would be great to have all those stories in it.
There were some bloopers, all right. It's like as the edits went along, I was like, oh shit. Yeah. It's just, writing a book, you're always like, oh, it's just a long process.
Yeah.
Does Ted? I mean, you don't have to answer this if it's in the book. We'll get people to buy the book. But does he talk about anything about Sammy Hagar and Van Halen, like in '77?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does. There's a lot of mentions there. If you do a word search for Sammy, there's a lot of mentions of Sammy there. So I don't know. Maybe Sammy's people reported back to him. There's 37 mentions of you and 62 of David Lee Roth, and maybe Sammy's mad. I don't know. But yeah. Yeah, on a serious note, yeah, they do. He talks about that, and he talks about Sammy quite a bit about his work with him on Montrose, and then with VOA, what was meant to be the follow-up to VOA, which was, I don't know, pre-production, basically, like kicking around ideas in the summer of 1985, and then of course the split with Van Halen and the Sammy enters the picture. So yeah, there's a lot of discussion of of his work with Sammy, and Ted said recently to Ultimate Classic Rock that Sammy's the the best singer in the world, and that like outraged the internet for like a day or whatever, the Van Halen internet. But I talked to him after that, and I said, "Did you see that?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "So what do you think?" He goes, "I'm glad I said it because I think it's true." I said, "Okay." Well, I argue with Ted Templeman.
Yeah.
I run a Van Halen group on Facebook, and I see the outrage every day, daily, hourly. It's people.
And I think if I were to translate, dare say I say I'm somewhat qualified to transfer Ted speak. I mean, I think what Ted means by that, he's not saying like Sammy's a better singer than Pavarotti. Sammy's a better singer than Frank Sinatra, or whoever you want to name. But he means that Sammy has this versatility that is pretty unusual, that he can sing blues and he can sing hard rock and he's all this different stuff that Sammy doesn't even normally do, that Ted has heard Sammy sing in private, knows he can do, and that's what he means by Sammy.
Oh no.
Greg.
We're talking about Sammy. Come on. Sammy, why don't you call Sammy? I did. I called him right there from the shop.
The powers that be didn't want to hear it.
No.
Mr. BHP. Is that Bruce? Thank you so much for the super sticker, man. He says, keep it up.
Yep. There's Bruce still trying to find the hole.
Thank you, man. Yeah. Once Greg, he's frozen. Once he unfreezes, he'll be back. Yeah. Cause for years, forever, we always, when was it? Was it around the time of the Carnal Knowledge record? They kind of started talking about how Warner Brothers wanted Sammy in the group.
Well, no, I mean, they mentioned it on the Van Halen Unchained thing. The Unchained, Unleashed.
Unleashed.
Sorry, the Unleashed. Yeah, Alex remember he talks about it. He's like, basically they had no idea, but as fate will have it.
Yeah. So for years, I've always wondered, like, what's the actual story with all that? And it sounds like it's in the book.
It is in the book, and I read a part of it, and basically they're sitting at the board, right? Don and Ted, and I guess they're having Dave sing some stuff, and I guess it's just not cutting the mustard. And one of them leaned over to the other one and said, "We got to call Sammy." And obviously, good thing they didn't. And we can argue about this all day as far as what would have happened if they made that call. I think at the time and the time period that Van Halen 1 came out, I don't think it would have.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
Hey, I guess it's my one. I live in Oklahoma, so I don't know, the hamster's on the wheel or something like that. I don't know what's going on, but
by the way, my dad left a comment earlier.
Your dad did?
Yeah, my mom is from Muskogee.
Oh,
actually,
Okie from Muskogee.
She's an Okie, yeah.
So I have family in Muskogee.
Yeah, please come visit.
Tulsa. I have family in Tulsa.
You do?
Yeah. I as a kid, I was always over there.
Got to come back and check out your roots.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, can we do? We were discussing it when you got frozen again, but the whole.
Hopefully, it was a better face when I froze.
Yeah,
it was a little cooler. Well, you weren't angry.
Pouty lips.
You just put on two hands.
That's right, exactly.
The story of when Don and Ted are there in the studio and Dave's singing and they have that discussion of like, we got to call Sammy.
Yeah, right.
Go over that and you know, is maybe what your opinion would have been if, I mean, obviously hypothetical is hypothetical and who knows what would have happened, but I mean, that's kind of a neat story, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's so the story goes that when Ted and Don did the demo, this would have been around March, April 1977, Ted was concerned about Dave's performance in the studio and was worried that maybe Dave couldn't pull it off in the studio. I mean, I think the thing is that there are some guys in general, men, women, whoever, go in the studio and they just can't quite, they're better live than they are in studio. And there was a worry, Ted was, that Dave wasn't going to be able to pull it off. And so the obvious thing he thought of was like, well, there's this guy, Sammy, who I did the Montrose record with and has had a solo career now, trying to get going on Capitol, that's sort of out there. And he's not anything but in some ways maybe the right guy for the job. And so, you know, Ted mentioned it to Don, and it never really went beyond that. It was just an idea that he kicked around thinking about if Dave couldn't do it. But he talked about in the book that he did a complete 180 on Dave within a matter of whatever few weeks. He would go down to the basement over in Dave's house and sit with those guys and listen to their music and talk to Dave. And he's like, this guy's, you know, smart. He's got great lyrical ideas. He's got this great kind of whole vibe about him. And he thought, you know, this is the right guy. And Ted said it in the book, if I had tried to replace David Lee Roth with Sammy Hagar in 1977, I would have made the biggest mistake in rock history. And actually, I was working on the book. He would always ask me, is that in there still? Like, you want to make sure to edit it out? I'm like, yeah, it's still in there. I didn't want it to be, he wouldn't want me to like edit that out, like in some draft, like we'd have to put it back in again. He was going to like, he's like, you know, because he really feels that way. He just talked about how, you know, he went from being a skeptic, like 100% Team Dave.
I wonder, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall and you know, hear that whole conversation and wonder what the band would have said if they went to Eddie, Alex, and Mike and said, hey guys, we need to get a new singer, you know?
Right.
I know that never happened, but
right. Yeah. And I think, I mean, again, that kind of reaffirms the fact that it was just sort of like, you know, like thinking out loud rather than sort of a plan. You know, I know that in the later years, far be it for me to contradict Alex, but I believe Alex has suggested that they knew in 1977, which Ted said they didn't know. And I find that, yeah, I mean, can you imagine, like, you approach the guys in the band going, hey, we're thinking about getting rid of your singer. Like, that could destroy the band. I mean, it could just be like, well, you know, F you. We're not getting rid of our singer. We want a new producer. We want a new label. Like, it could have just, you know. Right. So I think it was something that later on those guys found out about, and kind of became a thing for them to talk about after they had gotten with Sammy. But you know, it's an interesting footnote, and that's really it's also obviously so strange that Sammy later became the singer of Van Halen. That's what makes it even more interesting. But it was, you know, it's just one of those things that Ted talks about having to think about, like, well, what, you know, with any band, like, you know, sometimes there were guys who were drummers who couldn't pull it off in the studio. I mean, I think we kind of know. Not even in Ted's case, in the case of other producers, Cozy Powell was like the go-to guy. Like, whoever the drummer was who couldn't play the parts in the 80s, it was like, call Cozy. Cozy flew over and did the drum parts, and that was the end of it. And that was, you know, that happened quite a bit for a lot of records, big hard rock records in the 80s. You know, that was kind of the mindset that Ted had. Like, we don't want to be in the studio trying to cut a record with somebody who can't do it. But Dave did it. And so, obviously,
this is
did
kind of
great.
This is kind of silly, but I think it would be funny if Ted goes to the band and says, well, you need a new singer. I'm going to get Sammy in here. And Eddie goes, well, does he have a PA?
I mean, I think, and the thing is that there's like, I think Ted knew they were really tight at that point. I mean, like, they had been through all that stuff with Gene Simmons and everything, where Gene basically called out Dave and was like, hey, Bill Aucoin. You know, when Gene couldn't get the deal, that Bill Aucoin said to Dave, that Bill Aucoin looked at Dave and said, yeah, you're really the weak link in the band, actually. You know, I kind of like the band, but I really don't like you. Like, sort of like the band, not that much to sign you guys, but I really don't like your vocals. And so, I mean, they stuck with him through all that. So I think yeah, I mean, I think it's a total.
Wow.
It's amazing.
So,
Can you tell us the impact that Van Morrison had on a young Ted Templeman?
well, yeah, I mean, I think it was the big deal for Ted because Van had a reputation as a guy who was a tremendous talent, and beyond that, when Ted went to the studio with him, Ted was completely green, and Van didn't like whatever suggestions Ted had. Like Van wasn't having it. Like he wasn't having suggestions from anybody. I just actually heard an interview that Bob Lefsetz did with Bob Rock, and it was interesting too. Like, you know, Bob had a similar, not exactly the same, but had similar stories to tell about Van. He's just a quirky, at times difficult person to work with, and that Ted talked to me a lot about how he was like, okay, the Doobie Brothers record, first one didn't do that well. I'm going to be prepared. I got these ideas, and like I'm going to do these things and produce, like really try to like, okay, you know, first record, I flopped a little bit. The second one I'm doing now with Van, I'm going to get it right. And then Van was just like 1, 2, 3, and like didn't pay much attention to anyone said.
Yeah.
And Ted really learned from that the importance of a first take and a second take. That like, you know what, some people are talented enough and good enough, and it captures a certain magic, even if there's some mistakes on. They can be magical, and they can have like a little quirks to them that make it cool. And he said that was such, you know, instead of trying to like off edge off, you sort of might have a couple things like there's like be like a, you know, a bad drum beat on some of the Van Morrison stuff, but nobody cares because the vocal's so good, because the lyrics are so incredible, because the atmosphere is so good on the song. And so that's what he talked about, and he carried that over with Van Halen, where there are mistakes all over the Van Halen records, as we all know.
Every one of them, yes.
And he just left them, and that was from kind of understanding that isn't the be all end all of trying to make something sound so sanitized. So that was the big lesson that Ted learned from Van Morrison.
Yeah. So a little trivia.
Modern day recording to back then. I mean, that's two different things. You know, nowadays everyone wants to fix everything. You know.
Well, right. I mean, that's the thing. Like you'd have to punch in to fix things, and there was a lot of labor that had to go in those types of things, and you know, those were the things that Ted might have been willing to do, but Van, Ted said, would barely sing something twice. Like he would, you know, if he didn't, Ted might be like, you know, you really think you could do it better? And be like, no. He would just like mutter and walk away. He would just leave. Ted said he would like literally leave. So that was it. But you know what? Van was right. I mean, right? Van was right. It was good enough. It was more than good enough. And that's the thing. And so that was sort of the baptism by fire for Ted to be like, okay, it doesn't have to always be like this, but if it is like this, if you have someone who's that good, and that's what he talked about with Van Halen in the studio with the, especially with the musical, the parts, they were so good together. They were so in sync that you didn't have to do more than one. You recorded once or twice, and then you have the basic tracks, and you just do the vocals.
Mm-hmm. Little trivia for the chat. So Ted Templeman produced the Van Morrison's Wild Night session. Who played guitar on that?
I'll never tell.
First person that answers that correctly without looking at Wikipedia or Google gets a Johnny Bean guitar pick.
Ooh.
Oh. I guess I better
go. I said Johnny Bean guitar. I heard Johnny Bean guitar, and I was like, and then pick.
The guitar behind Johnny. The guitar behind Johnny.
Exactly what I was thinking. The guitar right behind Johnny.
Yeah. Well, hey, Metalhead Hippie, thank you for the $2. Okay, so Janice gets a guitar pick. It looks like
nice job, Janice.
There you go. So wait, what was the question again?
Who was the guitar player on the Wild Night session record that Ted produced? It was a Van Morrison record.
Okay, it looks like there's some answers in here.
Yes. So far, none of the answers are correct.
Dweezil Zappa, he would have been like 5.
Yeah. Brian May's incorrect. Quentin James is Tim Pierce. No. Steve Hunter, no.
He said Time Pierce. It wasn't him either?
He meant Tim Pierce.
Steve Hunter?
Steve Hunter.
Carmichael.
Steve Hunter is not. Eric Clapton is wrong.
Steve Hunter is a great dude, man.
Mickey McDonald. Ronnie who?
Just Ronnie. He won't say the last name.
Ben Tom, incorrect. John Fogerty's incorrect.
We're going to spend the rest of Greg's time.
Robbie Robertson, incorrect.
We got 3 more minutes.
Ronnie Montrose.
I'll hang
Ben
for a few guys. I cheated you guys out of at least 5 minutes. So
Ben Tom
At
and
least.
K. Tony are correct. Ronnie Montrose.
Oh,
Very
Ronnie
good.
Montrose. Awesome. So wait, there's 2 right answers then?
No,
There's
the first one.
Ronnie
the first one-
Montrose.
Yeah.
Whoever said Ronnie Montrose, I'll send you a guitar pick. So just send me a message.
Everybody write Ronnie Montrose.
Send me a DM on Instagram or Facebook or somewhere, and I'll send you a pic.
100 picks are going out in the mail tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't know. This whole bag is going away.
I know. Funny.
Our buddy John BL, who's our producer, he wants to hear about recording Al in 5150 with the Simmons kit.
Yeah.
And how that all went down.
Oh, man.
Well, that all went down that when Ed and Don and Al went to Ted and they said, we want to do the record 5150, Ted was surprised because in Ted's mind, originally, the idea was that it was going to be a demo studio. And that was, as far as Ted was concerned, that was always the plan initially. It wasn't that Ted didn't want it to be an awesome studio, but it was meant to be a place where Ed and Al, whoever, could work up their demos in sort of a more sophisticated fashion, and then they would cut the, Ted always thought, well, of course we'll cut the record at Sunset Sound or we'll cut it wherever. And it sounded good. Like, it sounded good. As Ted talked about, it didn't sound necessarily pleasing to his ears. Like, it sounded like it wasn't a big room, so you couldn't have a live drum sound, which gets to the Simmons kit in a minute. He said it sounded unique. It was like, it sounded good. He was like, wow, this sounds like a lot better than most backyard, home studios. But the problem was that the room up there wasn't big enough where you could have a full drum kit and have Mike and Ed in the room, mic everything up, put gobos up, partitions up, acoustic partitions, and be able to record everything. So they had to do, I think Alex came up with the idea of doing the Simmons drums, which would obviously have a much smaller footprint, and you don't have to have a room. There's no room drum sound, right? It's just you're hitting the pads, so you're not recording any, like, there's no mics hanging over the kit to hear the toms or anything like that. And so, from what I understand, I know for a fact that Don and Ted, neither of them were like, we don't really like this, but that was the thing, and that was part of the Brown sound concept that those guys were coming up with too. I mean, they were trying to do something that was sort of pushing their sonics to a different place, and so that was how it all happened. I mean, Ted didn't really have, like, I talked to Ted about the cymbals and stuff like that Ed talked about that stuff, and he didn't really recall that, but obviously it made sense. He was like, yeah, that's probably what we had to do. Talking about how Alex talked about how he overdubbed the cymbals for songs and things like that, because they couldn't really set up a full kit. But, that just kind of came down to a lot of what Ted's apprehension was, that it's like, you're making a record now with an electronic Simmons drum kit when we could be making it a Sunset Sound with the full room. And we could hash all that out. And Ted understands, obviously, the other side of the argument, but that was sort of his thing, is like, why would we record in a backyard studio, even if it's a killer backyard studio, and where we could go where the Beach Boys go and the Rolling Stones go and Led Zeppelin goes, which is like in Hollywood where we've recorded the other records. So
when I think of that, because I mean, I've heard that, we've all heard that story a million times of, the Simmons kit with, and then overdubbing the cymbals over it. And I never thought, when you just said that Alex was okay with the idea, or maybe it was his idea to do the drums like that, I always thought, like, why didn't Alex tell those guys, like, hey, let's do the drums at another studio and then we'll come back here and cut the rest of the record? I had no idea that Alex was, like, all good with doing it that way.
I mean, from what Ted remembered, I mean, it was basically maybe Alex I didn't talk to Alex, so maybe Alex would remember it differently. Maybe Alex, like, hated the idea too and just went along with it, but Ted seemed to remember that he, and Ted's recollection, again, which might be different than Alex and Ed's, it was that they were both like, had this basically like, this is the workaround, we're going to use the Simmons drums, and they were okay with it. And I think obviously the record sounds great, and Ted's like, oh, I was like, another thing was, I was like, I don't know about this, I was like, I don't know, this seems like, but yeah, that's how it went down. From what Ted remembered.
Interesting.
Here's the big question. The Doobie Brothers and Van Halen did have an overlap. Can you tell us about Michael McDonald's involvement with the song "I'll Wait"? Whose idea was it to bring him in? What he actually did on the song, and why wasn't he credited initially?
Oh wow,
So smooth.
that fits right on your face.
Well,
perfectly.
that's
awesome.
an interesting story, isn't it? I'll tell you the way Ted told me the story and the way we put it in the book, which was that I'll Wait was one of the original. There were about a dozen or so keyboard-based song ideas, one of which I think was probably Dreams as well. I don't know that for sure, but I think Ted doesn't know. Ted didn't have any recollection of that, but I suspect things like that maybe ended up on later records. There was a bunch of song ideas that got presented, and Ted, like, I don't know about Jump, and really didn't like I'll Wait. That was one of them, but Ed, Alex, and Don liked I'll Wait. And so that was one of the songs that sort of kept making the cut along the way, where other songs would get sort of other songs were, maybe like Ripley or something ended up not making the cut for the record. I'll Wait progressed to the end. And so what ended up happening was it was just this track with the keyboard parts, and they really wanted it. The brothers and Don presumably really wanted it on the record. And Dave just couldn't come up with something. Meaning, you can't have a song unless you have lyrics and a melody. Like, you have to have, as a pop song, you can't just put an instrumental on the back of a Van Halen record that's 3.5 minutes long, like that. So eventually, from what Ted remembered, Dave pulled him aside and said, "Look, can you call Mike McDonald and see if he'd come up and do some work with me on it, because I'm basically stuck." Because their brothers really wanted it on the record. And Ted said, yeah. And so he called Mike McDonald, and Ted had done, obviously, numerous records with Mike. And Mike met Ted and Dave at Ted's office at Warner Brothers in Burbank. And they played the track in the office. And Mike, from what Ted remembers, came up with the melody, almost all the melody for the song, and definitely the chorus lyrics, the lyrics for the chorus, I'll Wait, and all that stuff, and basically finished off the song. Like, again, Dave and Mike kicked around the song, but did that. And in fact, interestingly enough, Don Landy told me he remembered. I didn't put this in the book, but Don remembered that after that was done, tape came back to 50, and it was Mike singing along to the track or playing on the keyboard, whatever. Probably the tape playing of the Van Halen demo for I'll Wait with Mike singing over the top. Oh, wait. And Don said, we heard that. Go, yes, that's it. That's going to work. That's it. So that was it. So
where's that tape now?
Yeah. Can we hear that?
Oh, shit.
Do you know if Mike brought the cotton? Did he bring the cotton balls with him? The ones that he stuffs in his mouth when he sings?
I think he brought a keyboard. I know that. He brought his keyboard up to Ted's office, or used Ted's keyboard. Ted had a keyboard in his office, probably. I don't know. So, and then the rest of the story is, Ted went about his business, and the record came out, and he got a call from Mike McDonald, who was upset, and what's going on? He got these messages from his secretary, basically call Mike McDonald immediately. He's upset about something. You got to call him right now. Call him today. Call him right now. And he wasn't credited on the record. And Ted was like, "There's got to be a mistake." I was there. I mean, everybody knows you. The guys know. Everybody knows you did it. I mean, we all know. And that's the story. So you guys can fill in the blanks, but that's the story. And eventually, Mike was credited. So you guys know the reissue CDs. Obviously, Mike's on there. And Mike, I recently heard an interview with Mike where he said he made as much money off that one song as he made off of any other song in his career. Because the album sold 10 million copies or whatever, 13 million copies or whatever. It's just, it's up there with some of the other, some of his Doobie stuff. Like, he made a tremendous amount of money off that song. So, but
that's incredible.
You guys do the math. So somehow when the first pressing of the record came out,
I wonder if somebody got fired, or if it was somebody in the, never mind. let's not speculate here.
So it was Ted talked about how it was a problem for him because it was kind of unsaid that Ted was worried, and as you would if you were in his position, that somehow that Ted knew that was going to happen, and Ted had no idea. Ted was like, I didn't have anything to do with the songwriting. That was up to the songwriters to register their work properly, and so I didn't have anything to do with that. But of course, the implication was that sort of maybe Ted knew that was going to happen, and so Ted and Mike were very close friends, and he said it was really a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal because Mike was understandably upset because he felt like he'd done a favor, and then suddenly he had been forgotten somehow. So.
Did Ted share any names of any bands or artists that he wanted to work with but didn't have a chance?
Oh yeah, Stevie Nicks and Fleetwood Mac for sure. Eagles. I mean, those are the ones. I mean, he never. I didn't put this in the book because it was sort of a side note, and it wasn't really something that Ted could really remember the specifics. But at some point, Ted was in the mix to do basically was talking about was in the conversation to do a Fleetwood Mac record. I don't know which one that was or how serious that was. He didn't really remember. He did help Stevie Nicks out in the studio. I think the Edge of 17 record, when that was, he went down to the studio and worked with her a little bit. He didn't produce her or anything, but he just loved her as a talent. I know he said like his dream would have been to produce the Eagles. That never was on the table. But yeah, I mean, if you would, the other one was Tower of Power, which is the funk.
Yeah. Sure.
The funk fusion band out of the Bay Area that Ted absolutely loved and had actually signed them to Warner Brothers, and their drummer, David Garibaldi, left the band. And this was in 1980. Warner Brothers had basically re-signed Tower Power Ted had, and then Garibaldi, who was kind of, from Ted's perspective, like the guy in the band who made it all go for him because Ted was a drummer, left the band, and he's like, well, I don't want to do the record with Garibaldi. So that was a big disappointment to Ted. But yeah, the Eagles was probably the one he mentioned more than anything else. Just like he loved to have guys who could sing, that many guys who could sing like that, and just the songwriting ability was so incredible, and he said that would have been a dream for him.
Oh man, yeah, crazy.
Here's a question that Jay should ask: How challenging did Ted find? How challenging my voice? How challenging did Ted find switching from analog to digital? How
challenging did Ted find? Never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, he found it challenging enough because he wasn't really able to mix anymore. So what ended up happening was that around the mid 80s, when he started going to Power Station, he talked about how like the technology basically, like the board that they had at 5150 to do 1984, that was a board out of United Western. It was an analog board. It was a 16 track. That was something Ted was familiar with. And Sunset Sound, I don't think they had made the switch over yet, so Ted was familiar with that. But he said once he started working at Power Station, that he had to rely a lot more on his engineer, Jeff Hendrickson, who did Eat 'Em and Smile, Crazy from the Heat, Honeymoon Suite, Bullet Boys. I mean, you go to pretty much Michael McDonald, like pretty much all the stuff Ted did after 1983, he did with Jeff Hendrickson. And he talked about a lot how this, for him, mixing came a lot more about convey his ideas to his engineer, who would then manipulate the board, where in the past, what would happen was that Don would leave, Ted would mix a rough mix, Don would come back, Don would do a rough mix. They would kind of have their two rough draft mixes and then try to get on the same page, like trade off until they got it the way they wanted it. And that, he just said I didn't have enough time with my responsibilities as an executive to spend in the studio to be able to kind of keep up with the technology. He said, so that became more of a thing where I had to have the engineer rely on me talking to them what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's great.
Great question, Dave.
Thank you. I thought of you. That's it. I got no more questions. I'm done.
All right. Show's over.
I'm empty.
Well,
Steve Carmichael has a question. Do you know if Ted kept any memorabilia from his sessions or get gifts like guitars, etc., from artists he worked with?
Memorabilia. Yeah, I mean, he does. He has some things. Interesting couple of things. Like he when I was with him at his place, he showed me he had a Gucci. It's kind of interesting. He has a Gucci letter folder, kind of like a portfolio that Carly Simon sent him to say thank you for doing a record. And he keeps things like that. He had a card from Stevie Nicks. He showed me. Stevie Nicks had wrote, "Thank you so much for coming to the studio and helping." Like basically whatever. Ted like sat with her like when she was working on a vocal and just gave his take on how she do the vocal. And so yeah, he keeps stuff like that. I mean, if you went to his house or his apartment, you wouldn't. He's got a condo and he's got a house. I mean, you wouldn't know
like Eddie didn't give him any guitars hanging on the wall behind him or anything like this.
Greg froze again. I'm sure he's got some awesome stuff. I mean, it's Ted Templeman. I mean, look at what he's done. Mm-hmm. Boner Jams. I'll read this really quickly. Here, let's do that. Thank you so much. It's Friday night. It's time to see the entertainers of the Johnny Bean Show. pumped to see you all, especially Jay. Aw.
Oh God.
Isn't that nice?
You're so handsome. Have a great weekend, everybody.
You know,
Yeah,
I'm gonna need that haircut.
Look at that haircut, boner jams. That's
man.
awesome. Let's see. Okay, we'll wait for Greg to come back. He told us he'd have an hour, and we're
Right there.
we're about there. So there you are.
Sorry,
Hey,
guys.
man.
Welcome back.
No, it's all good, man. It's
People see me
all
disappear and reappear. But what I was basically trying to say, if you walked into his house or his condo, you wouldn't like. It isn't like it's like some sort of shrine to like. You wouldn't know it all. Like you wouldn't know it all. Like you would, there's like one. I don't even remember. I the story. I think he said, "Oh, last time I went to my storage, I pulled this out," and he showed it was like the gold record for like Wayne's World. And it was just like, yeah, I could that was when I could see it like it was there, and I just took it. But it's like, it's like not even hung up. It's not his trip, right? It's just not.
I would think that he would have like one of Eddie Van Halen's guitars behind him, on a wall somewhere,
No.
like me.
He said, no, it's yeah. I did get to see his Grammy Award, which was incredible. Like, so when the Grammy in 1980, that was really, really cool. So that's something that he has that displayed. But yeah, in his place there's some pictures of him with some of his artists. Like there's one with Linda friendship with Linda Ronstadt. He's got a picture of him and Ed working on the Fuck record and a few other things. But it's not like it's not like you're like walking to somebody. You see some of these rock star homes that were named like the gold. They have like the ego wall with like the gold records from
Sure.
But that was what is honestly that's what his office was like that in the 80s. There's a couple of pictures kicking around on Facebook where he's like, because that's what you're working for Warner Brothers and you want to impress people. Like you have they're like, oh, let's put another one. We'll put this one 2 inches off the ground, and this one's got to fit here. And you had them like,
that's
all
right.
the way up to the ceiling. But
I pictured Ted like in the Don Johnston jacket with the white pants and the gold records all on the walls behind him, and he's walking down with gold chains.
Listen. All you got to do is watch Yacht Rock. That's pretty much dead on right there.
I love Yacht Rock.
Ted told me when I first started talking to him, and he was like, at first I was like, what the fuck is this? It's like this, I don't get this at all. And then he was like, I was like, oh, I get this. This is funny. He kind of got he got it. At some point he had like this click, it all clicked for him, and he got it. And he thinks it's pretty funny. Yeah. Because first he was like, this guy doesn't look anything like me. What are they doing? Like this guy, but he missed the point for the first viewing, but then he got it.
Speaking of lookalikes, somebody else just popped in here. Wants to say hello. You might know this guy actually.
I'll take off my glasses.
Hey,
it's Mini Caleb.
Caleb.
Hey, it's me, Caleb.
Hey,
You guys know each other?
We do.
we do.
We buy our glasses together. We order them frames 2 for 1. Caleb gets one, I get the other, and then we're set.
That's right.
That's like 50% off.
You still owe me a pair.
I do. Oh, I thought did I get the discount last time? I thought. Oh, okay. Maybe you're right.
Anyway,
How you doing, man?
Good to see you.
John
Glad
Beal
you're
asked
finally
a
on.
question.
Oh, go ahead.
Dave, can you hear Caleb?
I sorry, Caleb.
No, it's okay. I want to hear. I love that John BL even interrupts with his questions.
That's exactly why I did it, because it was a John Beal question. I figured I'd interrupt people. I'm so glad you got that, because that was brilliant.
Oh.
I thought it was brilliant. I don't know.
That was really
Go
brilliant.
ahead, Caleb. No, go ahead. I'll ask you after.
I don't really have much of a question. I do know that. Okay, here's a good question. Has anybody been in touch with you about Van Halen Rising movie rights?
Well, yeah, the book has been optioned. It's been optioned for a couple of years, and all I can tell you is that I'm always the last one to know anything happens. There was some momentum that had happened earlier in the year where it seemed like something was happening, whichever that means, which means there was a script, and seemed like there was some momentum that it was maybe moving up the food chain along the process. The production company that owns the rights to it, you guys would recognize the name. I don't want to say the name, but you guys, it's not Steven Spielberg, but you guys would recognize the name. And
George Lucas.
Are the initials CC?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Decent.
No, because I told Cameron Crowe about your book when it came out.
Oh well,
And,
no, it's I thought you said DC. No, CC. No, but of course that would be amazing. But no, but all this stuff happened with coronavirus, and that sort of, as far as I know, kind of put the brakes on everything. I would think that probably one of the challenges is trying to do a movie like that is like, how do you like recreate a backyard party scene with like coronavirus?
So they're already like they're right near shooting. I mean, that's how.
No,
close
I
it
wouldn't.
is?
I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't say that at all. I would say that they were working on a script, working more aggressively on a script. There was a script that has been written, and they were basically going, I think we're going to push this year, which means basically like we're going to push it closer to maybe happening. Like until it like happens, it's not happening. You know what I'm saying? It's just like one of a dozen ideas that are being kicked around the studio. But
are you worried about that process just because when it comes to that kind of project, all I'm thinking about is the technical, the technical advisor, the person who's there to make sure the seagulls on the guitar are right, all that little stuff, that all the
I haven't
nerds
had much
think about.
I mean, honestly, I haven't had that much to worry about because, like I said, I get like an email like once every 4 months, and it's like, "Hey, this is what we've been doing," and like I write back, "Great," and then nobody answers me.
But I mean, do you like want to be involved? I mean, is there a way you can be
sure.
on set,
sure.
like on set, make they do have someone that's there for continuity.
Sure. I mean, I think that they would. Yeah. I mean, I think I would, if invited, I would certainly love that role. But I think the thing.
Caleb's asking for a job.
I mean, even with like the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds fun to
Totally.
me.
Yeah.
guys all show up. We'll all show up together the first
We'll all
day.
do
But like,
it.
I'm here with my executive producers, all these guys.
I'm here with
Could
all
you
of you.
imagine-
Put them in the credits.
He has the wrong
Could you
guitar
be-
pick. Eddie never used those guitar picks, bro. Get him out of here.
Could you
I,
imagine like
I know.
the five of us in a little nerd village on
The
on
stripes are
set
backwards.
somewhere, and they totally. That would be the funniest thing ever. Like a little area where we're sitting on directors' chairs, and then they refer to us for all the technical stuff.
That's right. I tell you, we'd be the 5 right guys to do it.
They
You got
the thing that the positive, I guess, is that it would be able to be done for a relatively inexpensive budget if you think about it. If you're just trying to track, like you're trying to do it like this, like the Social Network or Straight Outta Compton, which is basically like like Van Halen Rising ends and their stars. It's like it's the backyard party era. So you have to do a couple stadium shows, but it's not like it's like this massive budget you'd have to. So that's the good thing. The other thing, again, it's just me. I've never been in the loop of any of these conversations, but of course the movie would need music, and then that's the other thing that I always think about would be licensing the music, and if that permission isn't granted, it would be challenging. But again, that's all honestly above my pay grade. No, I mean, honestly, if you saw the emails I get, it's just like very short, like, hey, this is happening, but nobody, like, it's not like I'm looped in on like what the agents and what the producers are doing or the script writer. I'm not looped in at all.
I'm putting this together now because about 6 months ago, there's a local guy here who's part of the Ultimate Jam Night. His name's Derek Day. And check him out, by the way, all you guys. Incredible singer, songwriter, guitar player. And he called me up because he wanted me to school him on some Van Halen stuff for an audition. And now I'm putting that together that they were casting that part for that movie. It must have been for that. So
if that's true, that's news to me. I mean, I would never say that's not true, but honestly, that nobody told me. As far as I know, yeah, everything. I have not heard anything since right at the end of February, which was right around the time coronavirus started becoming like a big thing. And obviously Hollywood's still making movies, but I just kind of, again, putting 2 and 2 together, thinking like, how are they going to greenlight a movie where they're like, oh, you have to have social distancing on a movie set. Like you couldn't do it.
Well,
right?
they're just allowing sets to reopen this week. So that's
so maybe I'll hear
what's
something. I
happening
would look, obviously it would be incredible. And it would be like mind blowing for that ever to happen. But somebody told me a long time ago, like the best thing to do is just like be like, yay, they're still paying me a little bit of money for the option, and just go about your business and don't worry about it until like it's like happening. Like they're like, guess what? You can come out and we're gonna start shooting. And even then, like movies like don't get made.
Well, how nervous are you though that if this is your baby and you don't want them fucking it up, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, I already saw the basic. I shouldn't say I saw anything. I spoke to the person who worked on the script, and there were a couple of minor. I wouldn't say minor, but there were interesting ways that the characters in the larger Beyond Van Halen were going to be kind of laid out. It's interesting. Like it wouldn't have been some way I would have done it. I don't think it's like some sort of like outrageous, like wouldn't be like, that's ridiculous, we can't do that. But it would be like not the way I would have necessarily done it in terms of like trying to set up the drama in the movie. But it's I honestly, yeah, I mean, I have my vision for what it is. It's in the book, and then someone else is going to take it and they're going to make another. If they ever were to make a movie about it, it'd be someone else's work of art, and that would be, obviously nobody would want to see like if you write a song, Caleb, and you're like, it's really good, and someone turns it into something that you hate, you're going to be like, I hate this. They basically, they record the song and you hate it. But, at the end of the day, it's like beyond your control, right? It's like, I'm
the son of a Hollywood screenwriter. So I know all about, from what it goes from the page to the film, how much things change and how disappointing it is for the writer. The writer is so disrespected during the process of filmmaking. It's not even funny. But I'm happy for you. I mean, I know that, this is a movie, especially with all these movies being made that needs to be made, that it would be, and the reason it's better than almost them as famous guys is it's just way easier to produce. They can't reproduce. They can't reproduce the 1984. Yeah. They can't reproduce the 1984 tour. There's just it's impossible.
Right.
And but your story they can make, and just the period of it is very attractive to any kind of consumer, of that era. So I'm excited about it. And when you do come to visit the set, I would love to tag along. Just putting it out there. That's my Steve Anderson laugh.
My mirrored sunglasses, my Don Johnson suit on.
There you go. Can you tell us
who's that douchebag over there? Is that Greg Renoff? What the hell happened to him? Oh, hey guy, making a movie. You know how it is. Like, yeah, whatever. Talk to my. Yeah.
Can you tell us the Quincy Jones story behind the Beat It sessions?
Yeah. It's a pretty.
I got to run, guys.
Yeah, good to talk to you.
See you, Caleb.
See you later.
Have a great weekend, everybody. See you tomorrow night. Bye.
You too, man.
Caleb looks spiffy tonight, doesn't he, boys?
He did.
It's working.
The Quincy Jones story was that Ted was in his apartment watching some weird late night movie, and he was like laughing. He's like, I didn't smoke pot that much, but I was like stressed and I couldn't sleep, so I smoked this big joint. And whatever reason, I was just like up and I couldn't sleep, but I was just laughing and like this, like you can't stop laughing. He's by himself. He's like kind of like hunched over laughing, and like the phone rings, and he's like,
I do that all the time.
He's like, yeah, exactly. He's like, oh, it's like 1:30 in the morning. Someone's calling me. It's probably important. I better pick it up. Hello, and it was Quincy Jones. And he's like, Ted, it's Q. And Ted said he just kept laughing. And Quincy's like, Ted, what's going on? What like, he's like laughing. He said he was watching the screen and like, he couldn't find the remote control to turn off the TV. And he's like still laughing. And like, Ted's like, hey, he's like, Quincy's like, hey, I want Eddie Van Halen's number. Do you have it? And Ted said he was like, yeah, hang on. He's like laughing. And he's like, are you okay? I think I remember the number, and then gave Quincy the number, and Quincy called Ed for beat up. Yeah, but Ted said it was really pretty awkward. Like he had known Quincy for a long, long time, and it's just like Quincy's like, "You okay?" Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just watching a funny movie. He's like, oh, "Okay." It's like probably, I don't know if Quincy knew Ted was high or not, but like Ted said it was just like really like he just kept trying to stifle the laugh, like he just couldn't stop. So yeah, it was just a funny story.
That sounds like our conversations, Jay.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But here in pure medicinal, guys. Okay, just so you know, it's for my glaucoma or my my gray hair or something like that. It's just medicinal.
Eddie, Eddie.
Man.
Well,
Well, hey.
sorry I dropped out so many times, guys. It's like,
No.
Well, you realize every time you drop out, the hour starts over.
well, that's why I was like a little bit loose with the time in the back end. I gotta.
You
tell
owe
my-
us about 4 hours.
I'll tell my wife that she's gonna be like, "You're back on the internet again, huh?"
With 3 guys?
Put another hamster
What
on
are
the
you
internet.
doing in there? You're in there for hours.
Well, yeah, we're used to this. We do 3-4 hours of this like every night. So
What's
it's
this
all
we
the,
shit?
it's all the time.
Yeah.
This is weird shit.
Me and myself.
me and
Um,
me.
Yeah. But hey, I mean, it's up to you, Greg, if you want to answer one more question or something.
Sure. Last one. Yeah, sure.
But okay.
Pick a good one, boys.
Is there a good one? Is there a good one in the chat? Good question.
Cobra Kai Platoon.
Plantoon.
What's next for Greg?
Oh,
Yacht Rock?
that would be an interesting book. Yeah. What's next for Greg is that let's hope that public schools resume in America, because if they don't,
You're going to kill your kids.
no, I'm not going to kill my kids. It's just I've got 7-year-olds, so it's twins. So it's just like, I probably would do another Van Halen book, and I would love to start into another Van Halen book. I've actually have some ideas about trying to do another one. I am, but yes, obviously, if things continue to be circulating around coronavirus over the next year or so, it's going to be difficult for me to find the to be able to write. So my wife has her things she's got to do, and then we sort of have to trade off with the kids. So that's let's hope for everyone's sake that doesn't happen. But yeah, I mean, I think I have another Van Halen book in me, and who knows?
How about a really thick coffee table book on Van Halen's guitars and gear?
I've loved it, but I don't think I'm qualified. I'm just like, there's the red stripes and there's the black stripes. I mean, I know I know more than my sister does, but
maybe that'll be a book I should write.
Yeah, exactly. You guys should write that book.
That's Dave and Johnny right there. That's
Actually,
Exactly.
I approached Eddie a few years ago. He was like, "You can write the book, but I don't want to be involved." And at that point, it's all speculation anyway. You want like the real deal. You want
Right.
And that's we've never said this since Dave just let the cat out of the bag. We've never said this, but that's how Dave and I met.
Oh, really?
Dave approached me with that.
About doing a book? Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Honestly, I always thought it would be incredible to have. I mean, he did that a little bit with the Guitar Aficionado, but like to go through every single guitar and just have him like story about this guitar. Like, I don't know where far be it for me. I don't know where Ed keeps his guitars, but I imagine it's a large room somewhere in the world that has a lot of guitars in it. That a lot of guitars that probably have some meaning for him. Some probably he doesn't even like remember owning. Like, oh, I don't remember this guitar, but I would have him like go through 50 guitars that he actually has a memory about, an emotional connection with. That would be incredible.
That'd be awesome.
We can only hope.
Yes.
Well, I don't want to, if you don't want to answer this, that's fine. But have you, the 2 books now involving, with the Van Halen Rising and now the new one with Ted, have you heard anything, any feedback from those guys about it, or is just nothing?
I hear the only thing that I heard that Mike Anthony signed a copy of Van Halen Rising that somebody showed to him, and he goes, "Oh, this is a good book," and he signed it. And the guy actually sent me the autograph. It's somewhere I have my phone, like good book or something, Mike Anthony or something like that. Beyond that, it's all I mean, I have never heard anything directly from anybody. I never even heard directly from Mike. I mean, that was just somebody who actually told me that they had seen Mike whatever at a circle show or whatever it was, Cabo's or something like that, and in Cabo or something, and showed Mike the book, and Mike signed it. But no, it's not totally surprising if you think about it, and that's all. That's all. I mean, I always think it's got to be a little bit weird for anybody who has a book written about them. So I get that, but yeah, I never heard anything from those guys beyond that. So waiting to hear from Sam or even
Michael McDonald.
this guy, Mike McDonald.
Ben Tom wants some hair care tips.
Said, how did you get so handsome?
From Mike McDonald? Well, you gotta know when to go gray. I mean, come on, like you gotta know when it's time to go. Like you go from the dark sultry with the beard to then eventually you like let it go all like, you let that gray grow in there, and then you're the silver fox. But I mean, that's my tips.
What's those with those big eyebrows too? God, big black eyebrows, Scott.
Well, that was before manscaping. Come on, man.
That's not too far ago. Fargo?
Wow. Well, anyway, Greg.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, man, and
Yeah.
thank you for being a friend on Twitter, man.
Happy to.
I see, we're on. You tag me on Twitter like all the time, and I appreciate it.
Anything with guitar questions, I always defer. I always like, did I be? I was like, talk to the guy, talk to the man. This guy will probably know. Anyone knows, he'll probably know. So yeah, I enjoy it.
And they turn into great threads too. So.
It's an entertaining website, Twitter. You see that?
Oh man.
It's got its own weirdness, different than Facebook, but yes.
Well,
Cool.
Again, thank you so much for everything, Greg, and thanks for having a great sense of humor and for answering all the questions and just you gave a lot of great.
Happy to do it. Happy to do it anytime. Sorry again. I'll get a better connection. We'll work on that. So
No, it's fine. Trust us, it's fine.
So appreciate you guys.
Let's plug your social media stuff and website or whatever before we let you go.
Yeah, you can check me out on Twitter at Greg Renoff, and then there's a website for the book, which I can do signed copies of the book, which is templemanbook.com. I'm sure people know, or they don't know, that we were Ted and I were planning on doing a thing in Pasadena in April, which of course got canceled because of coronavirus. I haven't been in the same space with Ted, or since all this happened, obviously, and I'm hoping that'll happen eventually. We'll be able to get together and do some sign some books. But templemanbook.com, and then I'm on Facebook, and people can find me there. And yeah, I love to hear from people. I try to answer all the emails I get and messages and stuff. And I just am appreciative that people like the book. And it's been you never know when the book comes out how people are going to respond to it. And it's been really cool. People really seem to have enjoyed it. And so I appreciate that very much. It's nice to hear. It's definitely it's nice. It's nice to wake up and have people go, yeah, I really like your book. So it's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It is awesome. Very
Nice.
cool.
Nice. Cool. Okay. Well, I know you got to run, so we can
We'll do it again.
we'll do it again soon.
Okay. Talk to you guys. Thank you all.
Take
All
care,
right.
Greg.
Bye.
Nice meeting you.
Bye, Greg. Awesome. Greg Renoff and Caleb Nerd Halen and Jay Hannon.
Dave
Yeah.
Nesbitt.
Yes. So the link to the book is right down below, and the link to Renoff's Twitter and all his pages will be in the description. So yeah. So I guess that's it. Thank you so much.
When did you switch guitars?
When he was off
Stealth.
camera.
Stealth. Also, a quick trivia question. In what Van Halen song was this guitar used? Or a guitar like this one? Anybody?
Okay, last question.
Greg, get Greg back on here.
Yeah.
Greg wouldn't know.
Where's Caleb? Yes. Michael, thank
Hal
you
Face
so
is
much.
right. Hal Face is correct. Ben Tom is correct.
Oh,
John BL 5150 is correct.
look at that.
It was not used by Eddie Van Halen, although it was Eddie Van Halen's guitar.
Mm-hmm. On the record.
On the record and the video.
In the
Sammy
music
Hagar
video.
used the guitar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool.
Thrash Metal and Fun Riff says South of Heaven by Slayer. Imagine seeing that guitar being used to play that song.
Yes. That'd be
Probably
awesome.
sound good too.
Bill Spruce, yes, it's a Gretsch 6120.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's up to you guys if you guys want to hang out for a little bit. I know we usually do like 6-hour shows.
Well, I don't know.
If there's anything
Everything, I guess we, Dave got a new guitar if he wants to show that,
You can.
and then we can split.
mhm.
With Bill, if that's cool with you guys.
Yeah. Well, what do you guys think? We got people watching this. Do you guys want us to leave or do you want us to stay on? Because I feel kind of weird. Like when we have a guest, I feel kind of weird staying on for like another 3 hours after they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, seems kind of weird to me, but maybe not. I don't know.
Well, let's see Dave's guitar.
Oh,
There it is. It's a Nags Kenai J. J meaning junior.
Ow, ow, ow.
1 P90. Mahogany body, mahogany neck, rosewood fretboard. Guitar is about 5.5 pounds. It's super light. Really cool guitar. Serial numbers.
Cool.
Serial numbers are 1120.
wow. So favorite new guitar, huh?
It's a great guitar. I mean, it's not my favorite guitar, but it's a really great guitar. I love it.
So it'd be a favorite guitar for like a week, right?
Today.
No, it's a guitar that I wanted to have in my toolbox because it's a P90, and they sound incredible. P90s sound great, as you know, Johnny.
Yeah, they're my favorite pickups.
And
I would use P90s on everything.
I could probably use this guitar on any gig at any time for any song. It's really sounds great. It really does.
Nice.
They did a wonderful job on this guitar.
And you got it. When did you get it?
Friday,
Right.
last Friday.
That's Friday. Awesome.
Last Friday, and by Saturday it was up and running. And I've been playing it all week, really. Listen how loud that is. Crazy.
Mhm. Well, it's a P90.
Yeah.
Yes, P90s for life, Halface. That's right.
Yeah.
So,
The first of my Nags guitars.
First of more.
Yes.
So that's a good thing when you get your first guitar of a brand, and you want more. That's a great compliment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool. I'd love Jay. I don't know that you'd like the neck profile.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a 59 Les Paul, and I wonder how I know that. But yeah, it's a little bit big for you. But as far as the guitar sounds, I think you'd love it.
uh-huh.
And Johnny, I know you'd love this guitar. This would probably be your main guitar.
It is my main guitar, and I don't even have it.
There you go.
You know. Let's see what else. Leave a thumbs up if you guys are enjoying yourselves. Subscribe if you're brand new. Seems like there's been some new people around here lately. So make sure to subscribe to get and click the bell to get the alerts on YouTube, because we're on Facebook as well. And I always forget to mention that.
See, it's hard. It's hard to start the show again after a guest is on. It really is.
That's why I'm saying it's kind of strange.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, unless we started and did an hour and then they showed up, and yeah, maybe that's the way to do it.
Maybe it is. Yeah. Suck it up with us for an hour, and then.
Yeah, maybe I'll never turn the stream off. You know, it'll always be like you've been saying, Jay. You know, there's got to be a 24-hour Johnny Bean, something.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Halface, yes, the neck does taper down a little bit at the nut. Will Neal asks Dave, what's the difference between a... That's all I got.
Isn't it?
Are those yellow dots?
They're clay. They're not yellow. They're clay.
What? Well, is the clay yellow?
I guess it's a yellowish color. Will Neal says, Dave, what's the difference between a neck-through Floyd Rose nut and a top-mounted nut Floyd Rose nut? Well, if it's going through the neck, I think there's better transference of resonance. It's also a metal screw going into a metal nut, so it's more stable.
Mm-hmm.
When it's screwed in from the top, you have two very small screws screwed into a very little bit of wood. And once those screws stripped, you're screwed up. It doesn't work no more.
You talking about the difference between
Yes.
like this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are those heavy?
What do you think, man?
Yeah, usually it takes two hands to hold a guitar.
Well, this one's got a handle on it, so I shouldn't have a hard time. You see that? I
Yeah.
let it go to grab it.
Look at that.
No, what?
Huh?
What?
What? Yeah, one of our executive producers has a great idea. Yeah, maybe stop this show and start another one. That's actually a pretty good idea.
Yeah, but is everybody gonna come back?
Will you guys come back?
Well, we're going to do a show for 20 minutes?
Why not?
Okay.
What do you guys
Oh, man.
want?
I'd like to. I'm gonna go.
I'd like a slice of pizza. But I can't have it.
All right. Sean says, I am her. Okay.
Ooh.
All right, we'll do that.
Here.
We'll do that. We'll do that. We'll end this, and then we'll be right back for 20 minutes or for an hour or 3 hours, whatever it is. Come right back. And I got to do this.
Wait,
Gotta
can we
do
give
that. Thank you so much.
can we
Huh?
give Steve Anderson a happy birthday wish? His birthday was yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday, Steve.
Happy birthday, Steve Anderson. Yeah, I know. He kept reminding me.
I know, me too.
He kept sending me messages.
How come I never get any messages from Steve?
And I actually thought about asking him if he wanted to do a birthday stream last night, but I think he was out.
Oh yeah, he was out.
He was out. Thank you to our channel members. Thank you so much. Appreciate and love all of you. You guys make this happen. And yeah, so I guess we'll be right back.